this is the question, and I wouldn't hesitate to ask at the very beginning of our discussion, is this really, Mr. Cheng, likely to be a showdown between US and China?
No, I think that for both China and the United States, there is recognition that as key economic partners, as both major countries, we cannot afford to have outright hostility between our two countries. Clearly, we have different perspectives. We do have some differences of national interest, but I don't think that this will be a showdown of any sort between China and the United States.
Mr. Cheng, if I could remind you of what Secretary Carter talked about, your defense secretary, before coming to the summit in Singapore, he was talking about building what he called strategic structures for the United States and its allies in the Asia Pacific, and China consider some important components, as U.S. see it, of this structure very vulnerable to China, in fact, and influencing China's basic interest in the region. What do you make of this? Yes, on the one hand, people realizing it's important for the complicated relations to remain good, but at the same time, concrete actions would destroy that relation.
Well, I think both sides are engaging in concrete actions that the other side perceives as troubling. So, for example, China's efforts to build artificial islands, reports about the creation of an air defense identification zone in the South China Sea are alarming to the United States. Similarly, American efforts to create a stronger regional architecture, for obvious reasons, certain elements within China are going to view that as threatening. Part of the purpose of the Shangri-La Dialogue is to improve dialogue, conversation, so that each side can better understand the other side's perspective.
Now let me go to you, Mr. Yang. When we talk about the possible conflict between China and the United States, hopefully it's not likely to happen during this year's Shangri-La Dialogue, but nobody could guarantee two things. One is the South China Sea, and the other thing, of course, is the DPRK nuclear issue, which would lead to, as the US argue, a THAAD system to be established with South Korea. So let me go to some of these topics separately. First of all, South China Sea. What about that? You got a lot of surveillance coming from the US in the region, even though China's ships are keeping a distance between the US counterparts and China's own, but there could be possibility of conflict.
Well, theoretically, it is correct that there could be high possibility of the conflicts by any incident or accident. Fortunately, both sides, both governments has determined to avoid any kind of military confrontation, although the sharp differences on South China Sea, by striking a code between the two navies and also very frequent and effective dialogues between the male to male, plus any other hotlines. For example, a few days later, ICE and the ED will be held again in Beijing, gathering a lot of senior officials from both sides. So a lot of channels between the two sides can be prevent from happening such things. However, such differences and the possible confrontation on South China Sea really impede both of the great countries from getting greater interests, common interests. So that's the very bad. Furthermore, the possible we can never say we can prevent the dangers of a confrontation. So it's a really hot issue, really need to be addressed in urgent manner.
Mr. Cheng, let me go through some of the documents that both China and the United States have with one another to guarantee what you and Mr. Yang argue. One is as many as 90 different kinds of mechanisms of dialogues and hotlines in economic, political, as well as in the military side. And then there is, on the military side, two important documents. One is the notification of major military actions both sides should have towards one another. The other thing is what you call rules of behavior for safety of maritime and air encounters. These are all technical details that likely to help us prevent crisis. But as Mr. Yang just argued, Mr. Cheng rather, what do you make of the South China Sea preventing the two countries' militaries getting closer as both sides would wish to? And what kinds of strategic views both sides have to take at this moment when looking at the issue of South China Sea?
Well, to begin with, I think that sometimes we exaggerate the impact of the South China Sea on U.S.-China military-to-military relations. Notice that, for example, China is still invited to attend the RIMPAC 2016 multinational military exercise later this summer. China was invited and attended the 2014 RIMPAC. This is despite the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea. I personally look forward to when China will invite the United States to attend perhaps one or more of China's major military exercises. The South China Sea is obviously an irritant in U.S.-China relations. It is an important consideration because there are so many parties to it, but I think that we should not make it into the only focus of U.S.-China relations, even on the military side.
What about you, Mr. Yang?
Well, I think if you look at the, let me put it this way, if you look at the South China Sea issue a few years ago, that was not hot issue at all between China and the U.S. But why hot now? Simply because of the changing of U.S. attitudes towards this issue. In short, previously, U.S. took a low-profile, no-hand-in policy on the controversial issue on South China Sea, say take no position. However, in recent 2 years, with Mr. Cheng mentioned, with the construction by Chinese side on island, U.S. increased their involvements directly, indirectly, many ways on the South China Sea issue, including send warships, warplanes very close to Chinese islands. So why is that? Because they say, oh, China's construction caused American attention. But my question is, the construction by Vietnamese and Filipinos have been there for more than 10 years.
All right.
You know,
so
China
what are you
make a
trying to
reaction.
suggest there? What are you trying to suggest here, sir? If you could give one direct response
Very simple.
to Mr.
Okay,
Cheng.
very simple. We have several options to address this issue. Unfortunately, U.S. choose the worst, say, confrontation manner.
Mr.
So
Cheng,
just go to the table.
Mr. Cheng, have you ever thought about that? I mean, the other two options that Mr. Yang did not clearly, specifically laid out, but it certainly could be thought about. Mr. Cheng.
Well, I think that there's always room for more dialogue, and the SNED talks, the various defense consultative talks. As you said, there are 90 different mechanisms already in place for U.S. and China to talk more about these issues. I would, however, note that even before there arose the issue of the islands, which is very recent as a topic, there was unfortunately the Impeccable incident. And of course, before that, the EP3 incident in 2001. Both of these have unfortunately shaped both U.S. and Chinese perceptions of each other.
Talking about the Shangri-La Dialogue, it is not just China and the United States, but many other countries inside the Asia-Pacific region that are participating. For example, from Singapore. And now we are having on the phone Mr. Lim Tai Wei, who is an Adjunct Research Professor at the National University of Singapore. Mr. Lim, welcome to our program.
Yes, thank you.
It's great to have you. I'm sure Singapore now is busy working on the scheduling and also the service of all the conference attendees. But the question remains, that is, what about the countries in Asia-Pacific region? Where are they going to stand when you have U.S. and China likely to go into a sharp conflict during this conference? Is the host, Singapore, prepared for that?
I think the different countries in the region are looking for dialogue and frank exchanges. And also they have in the background contextualized against this talk the hopes for peaceful and de-escalation of tensions and conflict. And of course, the South China Sea, as your guest has mentioned, is an important issue. But on top of those issues, there are also other issues on the table, including the North Korean Peninsula missile crisis, and also issues of cybersecurity, and also issues where there are common stance amongst the countries in the region. This includes capacity building issues, and also common stance on non-proliferation, and also a topic which is also very important and frequently mentioned in the media, which is prevention of extremism and terrorism prevention measures. So all these issues are on the table, and they are there for discussion. There are over 20 delegations, and amongst these 20 delegations, many are high-level security
Right.
officials.
So your point is?
So this is a very good, sorry?
So your point is?
Over 20, I think it's 20 or 20, over 20 or 21 delegations that are gathered in the dialogue. So it's a good opportunity for officials at the senior level to communicate with each other, and also to be able to reach for common grounds on issues like combating terrorism and extremism. Yeah.
Okay. We've already heard from you a big list of topics, of course, already outlined by the conference earlier. But the question is, what are likely to be the attitudes of the host, Singapore, and some of the other Southeast Asian countries that are involved in conflicts, possible conflicts, at least about the territory and also sovereignty in the South China Sea, likely to react if the United States, for example, lead with some provocative words, as the Chinese would wonder. Mr. Lim, what about that? We have already heard from Mr. Zhang McCain, who is the Senate chairman for the Armed Services Committee from the United States. He's likely to join later together with the defense minister of the U.S. Of course, some likely to be some harsh words towards China. So at the time, what would be the reactions coming from Southeast Asian countries, particularly Singapore, who Mr. Carter regarded as the closest ally of the United States in the Asia-Pacific region, as he said?
Well, Southeast Asia is a very diverse region, and there are 10 countries within ASEAN, and each of them have good relations with
for example,
the major
Singapore?
powers in the region. Sorry?
For example, Singapore? My question is more about Singapore, the country you're from.
Singapore has good relations with major powers in the region, and as the host of the forum, it hopes that there can be some issues of cooperation between the dialogue partners at the forum, and also some frank exchanges of ideas. Mm-hmm. And this could help to contribute to greater understanding between countries and members that are represented at the forum. Given that this is these are senior level officials, it is a good opportunity for them to do so at a particular forum with the issues on the table.
All right, Lim Tai Wei, Adjunct Research Fellow at the National University of Singapore. Thank you so much, Mr. Lim, for being with us. We talk about many of the countries in Southeast Asia. One of those is the U.S. important ally, the Philippines. Will have a new president in the office at the end of June. Take a look at this. The new leaders have sent some signals right before the Shangri-La Dialogue, keeping the U.S. as the distance, as he said. He said that his country needs to chart a course more independent of the United States, and also in a sign of a possibly warming view toward China. The coming in president, Duterte, called Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, a great president. He also said that his administration, quote, is bent on dealing with China through peaceful dialogue. There's no other way but to go bilateral, end of quote. Mr. Yang here with us in Beijing. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Philippines was filing a case against China. China did not accept this case and also find a lot of loopholes in the arguments by the Philippines. But when you look at the incoming president of the Philippines taking a very different stance, so how will all of these moving factors likely to shape this year's Shangri-La Dialogue?
Well, I think the new Filipino president may probably become a game changer of the existing game among players. Originally, the issue was the issue between Chinese and the Philippines. But in recent months, it suddenly become the issue between China and the United States. And the U.S. President Obama said China should go rule of law. However, in terms of rule of law, by year 2000, China and ASEAN countries struck DOC, and China and the Philippines struck several agreements and consensus by bilateral dialogues on the controversial issue. And then the Filipino go the wrong way, go away from the original right path. But now the new president sent a signal that they are going to return. So the returning policy will change the existing game.